Hey guys, welcome back to G.I.Joe on the Tabletop. My name is Brad from the Cast Dice Podcast Network, and we are going to have a very special guest on the show today. It is our old friend from Dr. Mercury's blog down below. If you have not checked out Dr. Mercury's lab, it is amazing. The man's G.I. Joe 156 tabletop toy collection verges on, and I'm quoting him here, madness. It is amazing, and today we're going to talk about how he has made some of his Cobra naval troopers. Specifically, we're going to talk the Cobra Eels, and we're going to talk Cobra Lampreys. Without further ado, let's talk to the man himself, Dr. Mercury. Now, guys, we are back, and of course, we are back with the good doctor, Dr. Mercury. Hey, man, welcome to G.I. Joe on the Tabletop. It's a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me.
Man, I'm, as you said, your collection of G.I. Joe 156 scale, 28, 25 millimeter, whatever you want to call it, collection is insane. Ballpark, how many models do you think you have?
Oh my God, I didn't even think of that. I want to say for both sides, I probably have well over 100 figures. You know, at least for the miniatures. You know, most of the like regular troop forces, I have a platoon's worth of 30 models or so, but then that's for like every faction and stuff. So
yeah. But I mean, you've gotten into and I'm sure we'll talk about it on future videos. You've gotten into some of the wacky side branches. So you've got Python Patrol, you've got whole units of eels, snow serpents. I mean, you name it, man. Regular Cobra Divers, Ice Vipers, Crimson Guard, Bats. I mean, you even have an entire Iron Grenadier army. It's crazy.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, it's a rich tapestry of stuff that you can pull from for like, you know, anything that you wanted to paint. Like if you're really into camo and stuff, there's plenty of different varieties of camo to paint. You know, plenty of odd color schemes. There's a lot of stuff within G.I. Joe. Yeah.
Right on. Well, today we're going to have you on to talk about one of your projects. And we're going to talk about, actually two, I suppose. We are going to talk about the Cobra Eels and how we can put them on the tabletop. But I guess we're going to get into the whole Cobra water branch. Now, of course, we could get into some of the later figures, but I think we're just going to stick with the earlier sort of 1985, 1986 era of vehicles and figures today, because 1985 was a pretty cool year for army builders or unit builders, if you're talking about for Cobra. It was the first time we saw the CGs. It was the first time we saw the eels, the snow serpents. I think that was the year we saw Televipers. There were just so many great, iconic, quote-unquote, units that bulked out the basic Cobra Trooper in that one year. And ironically, we didn't get the Cobra Viper for another full year, right?
Yeah, that was a great, I remember the card back. It was a great, you know, time for the Joes, the releases. Yeah, all those different troops, and too, like the action figures themselves were like festooned with you know, pieces and parts. You know, the eels had a separate jump pack portion of their scuba pack, so they were actually rocket troops as well. They had flippers that were separate. You know, the rifles. You know, there was a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. And I mean, they even had the little mouthpiece that connected from their helmet to the backpack, right?
Yeah, the details were amazing. Yeah,
it was a great year. Well, let's talk about the eels, because we're looking at the picture of. So we have, this is the blister or the card back image of the eel, and now we're going to move on and look at their file card. So the eels were Cobra frogmen. Now, their primary military specialty was underwater demolitions, secondary specialty, marine engineering, and of course, birthplace is various countries. Now, this isn't necessarily their, why am I blanking, file card picture, but this is from the Order of Battle from Marvel Comics, which has the same information on it. Now, they're rated as E4 or equivalent. And the text is, eels are underwater demolition specialists of the Cobra Legions. They man and operate the Cobra Marine outposts disguised as offshore drilling rigs and augment the crews of larger Cobra naval vehicles. And we're going to get to that in a second because I know you got a couple. Eels undergo a rigorous 2-part training program in the warm, shark and pirate-infested waters of the Cayman Islands in the Caribbean, and as opposed to the Cayman Islands somewhere else. But anyway,
Right.
in the frigid, dark depths of the North Atlantic. Their training regimen includes marine structural engineering, explosive ordnance, underwater fighting techniques, and marine geology. Now, let's talk about what makes the eel look like an eel, because there are other Cobra divers. How do we make, if we're going to turn this figure into a tabletop 156, 25, 28 millimeter model, what kind of things do we need to include? Jason, what do you think?
I think, some of the main distinguishing features of the eels is, one, their helmet. The helmet is not like your typical dive helmet. So it's somewhere across between like an actual combat helmet and a scuba mask of some sort. So you have that. And then the other main distinguishing factor, I believe, is the backpack, because it's very unique. It's a scuba pack that has the jet pack attached to it as well, that was detachable for the action figure.
That's right. Now, as a kid, I always argued with one of my friends, is it an actual jetpack or is it an underwater jetpack propulsion system? How did you read that?
I thought it was, my interpretation, I was young too. I think I was like maybe 12 or something at the time when I had the figure.
Exactly.
But I think I was thinking it was an entry to get them into water, like being dumped out of planes. So it was a jump pack that was just there enough to slow down their ascent or whatever to get them to the target area, because they made it detachable, which is odd too. Like it seemed like that was something that they were just going to jettison once they hit their target area.
I can't argue with that. We have wisdom. That seems logical to me. Yeah.
Whether that's right or not, I don't know.
Right on. Well, let's talk about how you made yours, because when we get into it, if we look, the pictures of the eels usually show almost a hexagonal mask shape. But you went with more of an oval, but these helmets that on your models still look very eel-like. So talk us through that.
Well, I think one of the things, as I'm doing converting and stuff, I especially if I'm using like a real world reference, I'm also thinking in terms of scale. So a 28 millimeter, you need just enough of it's almost like doing a caricature drawing of somebody. You need enough of the defining characteristics so that when someone looks at it, they know what it is without it being exactly that thing. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely.
So with that helmet, it was actually Simon, Simon Quinton, I think is, lost his last name there. But he had an idea. He had the CP helmets from CP models already filtered out in his head as that's the eel helmet. And he was trying to find a body to put it on and still couldn't come up with a backpack. So with the CP helmet, which I agree with him, that's very, very close. That's why I ended up using for mine. Body wise, he was saying to use Cylons from Crooked Dice, and I just didn't feel like they were right enough. Like they were similar in some of the how the way the bodies are built and stuff, and the uniforms are built, but it still didn't have that scuba diver feel to it.
Right.
So when I saw the Empress models, Empress has a line of USMC modern frogmen. They were perfect, in my opinion, for eels, for the bodies.
Right.
So the CP head, I clipped off the Empress model's head, replaced it with the CP model's head, which they sell in sprues. So it's, it's very consumer friendly.
Nice.
And then the last part was making the backpack, which again, that was like another Tinkercad project where I put it together in Tinkercad and then had 3D models printed in resin. And that was one of the first 28 millimeter conversion piece sets that I made. And then, that's available up on Thingiverse too.
That's right. So if you go to Thingiverse and you look up Dr. Mercury, you can actually find those backpacks if you want to print and make these models yourself. And CP Miniatures, as you say, sells those helmets. And Empress Modern Frogmen, those are those bodies. So you can literally, you at home, I know a lot of people have been asking, how can I make the models that I've been showing through my Facebook page? Well, here you go. This is exactly how you can do it. All those pieces are available to you right now. Now, I am also noticing that in the foreground of the picture that we're looking at, there are some Cobra Night Landing Zodiacs. Now, those are also available on Thingiverse. So, I mean, it's amazing what's out there if you want to add those. But before we get to anything else naval related, let's talk about a slightly more unorthodox swimming attire outfit. And that, of course, would be Baroness's wetsuit or bathing suit. Of course, made popular in the G.I. Joe cartoon series. Now, you actually made this model for the tabletop.
Yeah, I did the bikini version just for fun, fan fun. But the bikini version was from the what was the it was the guy that was the toy master that had her and Flint and Lady J and Cobra Commander all paired against each other. So when the Baroness was abducted, she was in a hot tub at the time, wearing this bikini. So there was a model. I can't remember. I'm terrible at this. I don't remember where I got that miniature from, but there is a series of miniatures out there where it's women in basically swim attire. And all I did was she already had a harpoon gun. All I did was.
Oh, did she?
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. I think she was meant to be like a Bond villain.
Oh, and cool.
I want to say it was a Spanish company that does the miniatures. And because I did a Lady J too, also in a bikini. But the only thing I added was the scuba goggles on the Baroness for like her glasses. So
yeah, exactly. Baroness has got to have glasses.
Right. Yep.
Now, what's also interesting is if we jump back to the order of battle, there is a picture. The picture that is on the eel card is not the one that it does not actually match the quote unquote eel. And they actually did make an action figure that represented this sort of color scheme later on in the modern era. Whereas it's more red than gray, and it's got different equipment. Now, you actually made a squad of these guys.
Yeah, those are from the Lit Adventure League. They have their own miniature line set that they did. And they did a set of modern German scuba assault troops.
That's right.
And it's only a 5-man pack. And literally, I did nothing to it. All I did was I painted them in that same color scheme as those Cobra divers. The red and black with like the white stripes.
Yeah, they look great. And I do remember on your blog, you mentioned that they are slightly smaller, only slightly. So if you look at the pictures on the screen, you'll see that you've, and I'm speaking more to the listener than you, Jason. Sorry about that. You've bulked up their base a little bit.
Yep.
You have them standing on some rocks. And if you hadn't told me that, looking at this picture, I wouldn't have known that they were shorter and slightly out of scale.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, when trying to make things match, that's often the best way to do it. Yep. Well, let's talk about another Cobra specialist. Let's talk about the Lamprey, who are the drivers of the Hydrofoil. Now, these guys are, commonly relegated to driver status. So when putting vehicles on the tabletop, I'll be honest, outside of Clutch, a lot of the vehicles for my G.I. Joe 156 project, I don't really have models for their drivers for a lot of them. I just assume Wild Bill's in the Dragonfly and that sort of thing. However, these, I guess because the Hydrofoil is a open cockpit vehicle, you've actually made these. But let's talk about what a Lamprey is before we talk about how you made yours. So the Lamprey is the Cobra Hydrofoil pilot, codename Lamprey. File name unknown, primary military specialty, Hydrofoil pilot, secondary military specialty, Cobra Frogman / Eel. Birthplace, various countries, grade E3 or above. Lampreys are the elite of the Cobra Sea Arm. To qualify for lamprey training, a candidate must be a Cobra trooper in top physical condition who has completed his eel training. Eels are the frogmen, underwater demolition specialists of the Cobra Legion, as we spoke before, and has been operational as an eel for more than a year. The training is highly selective, and more than 50% of the applicants wash out before completing the course. Now, if we are talking about what visually makes a lamprey, Jason, what are the characteristics that you think are crucial as a caricature almost? What is necessary for you to have a lamprey on the tabletop and have it look like a lamprey?
Sure. So when I look at the lampreys for the action figure and the file cards, the things that stand out to me is they have to have some form of life jacket or some kind of jacket in general. And the helmets are very distinctive. They're, almost like a glass dome with a visor. They're very, very like space age looking, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree. And they have that silvery outfit,
which I guess was like for if like their ship got destroyed or whatever, that they could be picked up. That was my only thought, was like, how pilots wear bright uniforms in case they go down at sea so they can be spotted. Maybe it's the same deal for the lampreys.
Exactly. Now they piloted the moray eel, the Cobra Hydrofoil. Now what's interesting there is the first couple times the Hydrofoil appeared in the comics, which is where I base a lot of the material for the show on. The Hydrofoils were piloted, or sort of the proto Hydrofoils. They were kind of looked like the Hydrofoils that we know now as the toys, but they didn't look completely like it. They were piloted by just regular Cobra troopers. It isn't until Cobra Commander literally introduces the lamprey in a frame in the Marvel comic, where he says that these are the Hydrofoil pilots. Very nice uniforms, very smart, quite modern.
Pretty.
Was it?
Yeah.
Modern?
Yeah, it's something like that. He's like very pretty, very smart, but pretty as pretty does.
Pretty does. Yes.
Yeah.
But so let's talk about yours. So, and here is the Hydrofoil in question. Now, you have several of these Hydrofoils yourself. You've actually 3D printed and converted up the Hydrofoils. And of course, to go with them, you have to have your lampreys. But you didn't just put them in as drivers and gunners. You actually have them as independent figures as well.
Yeah, my thoughts were, well, we'll start with the morays first. The morays, the Hydrofoils themselves, were made by Jabberwock on Thingiverse, who's done a wonderful job of recreating a lot of the G.I. Joe vehicles and stuff that they used in the cartoons and the comics. So I had 2 prints of those made. Each were made in PLA. So the pictures up on my blog, that's PLA prints for the printed material. The lampreys themselves, I first made the pilots, and I made the pilots using Recreational Conflict, which is a U.S. company. They have a series of like under-recognized miniatures called Lead Bones. And it's a weird series of miniatures, not necessarily, it gets like no press. No one even knows this company exists, but they're at our local conventors like all the time. And they make single figures. They sell single figure lines as well as like, complete lines as well. But the Lead Bones, I think, were meant to be like kind of homages to Resident Evil, like the Special Forces teams.
Yeah.
Well, the Lead Bones miniatures, they have separate figures of pilots standing and pilots sitting. And those pilots are wearing flight suits with vests over top that look like, they could easily be inflatable vests or life vests, and their heads are separate, so it's ripe for conversions, and they're $2 a figure, which is like dirt cheap in today's standards. So the standing figures I converted to be the turret gunners for the crafts, as well as I've used some of them also for like turret gunners for his tanks and stuff as well. Just about basically anything. I even made one into Wild Bill. But
nice.
So they're really, you can get a lot of use out of the figures, and then made them as the pilots as well, where I just cut them off at the waist, mounted them on a washer, and had those as the drivers as well for the crafts. Right. The heads, My friend Ronald Stalter. It came up when I was talking to him about it, because we both got our morays printed at about the same time. I was like, man, I'd really like to get some pilots for this. And he said, I think I have a head that would work for it if you can find bodies. So the head that he found was from RBJ Miniatures. Again, another company that's underrepresented, gets like no press. But I've, mined a lot of stuff out of them as well. So they have head sprues of these Star Marines that they have. And the Star Marines helmets are almost exactly the same as the Lamprey helmets. I'm sure it's unintentional, because, there's no way that you would ever, think that they're using that for their motivation. But it's just one of those things where visor, okay, glass dome, okay, helmet, you rolled the dice enough times through enough makers and you get a lamprey out of it. So their head sprue is, I think it's maybe $2 or $3 or something for like 4 heads. That's enough to get you the pilot and crew that you need. And then I had the crew made, I had the pilots made, and then Reginald T. Stumblecock, who is on the one group that we belong to, he had a conversion that he did using crooked dice, where he made a topside, which is one of the later like Navy characters that they have for the Joes. And he used one of Crooked Dice's X-Commandos. So again, when we talk about like utilitarian figures that you can get a lot of use out of, those X-Commandos are like, man, it's a well you can keep going back to.
Yes.
So I thought, if you can make topside with it and make it look that good where he looks like he has a vest on, that's perfect for the lampreys as well. And now you have a boarding party. So it's not just, now you're using the lampreys more than just as a dedicated driver, more like what their file card is saying, where they're being used to like see ships or, amphibious actions, all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely. And those X-Commandos, as you say, are great from Crooked Dice Miniatures.
Oh, yeah.
Because I made my cutter using the one with the pistol, and I also have my scrap iron. I think your scrap iron, too, is made out of the Kneeling Heavy Weapons Trooper.
Yep. And Law and Order, I made a Law and Order from them. I mean, you can just keep going. There's a lot of use out of that body. And again, the heads are separate. So it gives you a lot of ability.
Absolutely. Now, if we look at the PLA material now, we're looking at a close-up of one of your hydrofoils. You can see one of the complaints that some people have about PLA, and I'll admit I'm occasionally one of those people for some vehicles, is that angular surfaces, that aren't horizontal or vertical, sometimes you can get the gradations showing. And for a lot of time, I was thinking, well, this makes these unusable. And it wasn't till that I actually saw your stuff that I actually went, I'm going to roll the dice with this. And my APCs, which you can see if you look back in a former, one of the prior videos for this, it wasn't until I saw your stuff that I tried it myself. And they totally work. And it's because when we paint these things, we have them so close to our face. But with your stuff, when you have so many pictures of so many vehicles, but it's from the tabletop level, you can't tell, can you?
No. And to be honest too, like, so not to get off on like a whole side tangent on 3D printing, but with PLA and with other materials, 3D printing in and of itself, and I can't stress this enough, is its own art form. And there are people that are very, very skilled at printing in PLA. And there are people that are very, very skilled at printing in resin. And the way those devices are, I've owned one and I was so frustrated with it that I returned it. Plus the fact that it was faulty when I got it. But for me, that is another hobby in and of itself.
Right.
So
agreed.
There are people that are very, very good at printing. And when you find a person that's very good at printing, make friends with that person. Give that person what they need, because that person can help you in getting what you want and what you need as well. So there's a lot of services out there. We're really blessed in the U.S. here. There's a service that's part of like the gig economy, basically, where it's called Treat Stock. And treat stock is you can type in on treat stock what you're looking to have printed, what you're looking to have it printed in, what you're willing to spend, how far you're willing to have it shipped from. It's almost like buying a used car, or, you compare it to like online dating. It
Yeah,
all works
exactly.
by this. You put the model and the color in, and you're going to find what you need. And it'll list the vendors, and all those vendors are everything from hobbyists that are only printing, to pay off their printer, basically, that they bought for themselves, to people that are doing it for a living. And it'll show you statistically how many people they employ, how much they make a year, what their ratings are by, 5-star ratings, 4-star ratings, what the reviews are. And you can go through there and pick out someone to make the piece that you want to have made and have it made well. So, and it makes a huge difference. A hobbyist that maybe just bought their printer that prints their first piece, you will probably see every grain, every tick, everything in the model. Whereas if you have a guy that's very experienced, he's put his hours in, he can make that same model in under a week, and it looks beautiful. It almost looks like resin,
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
I'm holding up. I have my visitor shuttle that I've been using for my games of 7TV with my visitors, and this was printed by friend of the show, Pete West. He's a quote unquote amateur, but my God, this is amazing, and it. I mean, on the tabletop, it looks just as good as my resin stuff.
Right.
And I cannot thank him enough. The only thing that PLA as a material gives me nightmares about is when I'm originally painting it, occasionally it drinks the paint, but compared to resin, but my God, this is a perfect print, and Pete is just sensational. So for me, I could not have said that better myself. So thank you, because I don't know how to talk about it on a future video. Well, let's now let's do. I'm pressing the wrong button there. Let's talk about the hydrofoil in general. Now, you say you have 2 of these. Now, what scale are you? You're running all of your naval vehicles at 156 scale.
Yep. Everything I've done for the Joes has been at 156 scale, 28 millimeter.
And how are you playing with it? Because I'm running most of my Joe stuff, basically, because I want to have platoon / larger level games, so I use bolt action for that. And I've been using 7TV for smaller scale. But you have a very different rule set that you are running through.
Yeah, the rule set that I'm using is actually a rule set that I wrote probably about 10 years ago. When Pulp was becoming like a really big thing within the gaming community. And at that time, I was a business partner with Iron Ivan Games, which wrote a series of World War II rule books. One of the books that I wrote for that company as a partner was I wrote Where Heroes Dare. And with that, I wanted a rule system that would allow me to field basically heroes, characters, and then minions in groups of anywhere as few as 3 and anywhere as large as like 15 to 30.
Right.
So the way that the rule system works, it works off of a lot of the same mechanics as disposable heroes, except that it also has characteristics which are called shticks that are used to give characters character. And also the characters, you have leads, companions, and minions. And basically how it works, without getting in like super in depth with the rules, it's very basic. And once you play like a game, you pick up on it very easily. But how it works is each lead has 3 points of dare, a companion has 2 points of dare, and a minion has 1 point of dare. The dare is the number of attacks you can make in hand-to-hand, as well as the number of wounds that you can absorb. And it's also the same characteristic is used to solve like riddles or puzzles or tests within the game. Yeah. So what that means is as a character gets wounded, they become less efficient at fighting in hand-to-hand. They become less good at solving puzzles, So it kind of transfers over, and there's very little note keeping. Actually, there's no note keeping. You put a marker beside your model when they're wounded,
and you're ready to go. And that's one of the things I love about that rule set. I did buy that because I saw that you had talked about it before, and when I was reading through it, I really liked that. Like 7TV to a degree, but with yours, you do have those puzzle checks. So if you need to, for example, if you want to play a super pulpy game and you want to have your commandos, pick a lock or cut through a fence or hack a computer in the middle of the game, a lot of tabletop rules don't accommodate for that, but yours does, and I love that.
Yeah, I think with Pulp, and this could be like a whole nother side venture.
This is a whole other video.
Yeah, it's a whole other video. But with Pulp in general, it's not just a war game. So it's not just two war bands clashing, in my opinion. So with Pulp, there needs to be some form of narration. There's something that's taking place that makes it Pulp. Otherwise, it's just another skirmish game. With Pulp, there's some characteristics that travel across the genres, irregardless of time, 20s, 30s, 50s, 80s. You're always going to have larger than life heroes. You're always going to have these exotic villains. You're always going to have these weird locations. And there's always going to be like doomsday devices, death machines, that kind of stuff involved with it. So
exactly.
So I made a free supplement up that I put up in a couple groups where basically it's used in conjunction with Where Heroes Dare, but it has all the stack cards out for like the G.I. Joe characters, where I made basically shticks, which are abilities specific to Joe characters, so that it's, written right for Joe's, but it's fan based only. I don't sell it. I'm not looking for money or anything from it. And in fact, with Where Heroes Dare, I don't own any rights to it anymore. That was sold when we sold the company. So Brigade Games actually owns it. If you want to copy the rules, you can get from them, but no money comes to me. So, I use the rules because it's something that I know from memory, and it's something that I'm easily able to run in the house here, so.
Yeah, which is why I use bolt action. But they are great rules. But it's one of those things that this school holiday I was looking to actually put on the tabletop. But now I'm by myself, so I'm gonna have to try it solo.
Right.
But yeah, we all are. Now, before we go, I think it's important to talk about your blog, Dr. Mercury's Lab. Now, people can find pictures of your amazing projects there. But while we're talking naval, I mean, you have the shark, you have Cobra divers on sea sleds, you have the hydrofoil, you have the whale, you have a pontoon boat that a Cobra seaplane docks at. I mean, you have a submarine, like a full-size Cobra submarine. You have all kinds of awesome naval, and I'm just scratching the surface. I mean, you also have small submarines. I just could not put it all in here. We definitely going to have you back to talk Navy at some point, because that is just a part of G.I. Joe that I am just not familiar with. Did you just run out of land, or did you?
No, I think what happened was, I had the USS Flag as a kid, and I loved it. So it was it literally ate up like my playroom.
Right.
But I had the Flag, I had the Hydrofoil. I was very spoiled as a child. I had the hovercraft, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I had all those toys, and I love those toys. And to tie it to like a bigger thing, I really think like a lot of what got me into miniatures and collecting miniatures and tabletop gaming was those original love for the action figures and toys that I had as a kid.
Right.
So when this stuff became available, when you found people that were now sculpting G.I. Joe figures, or people that are converting stuff to make 28 millimeter miniatures, I mean, it was like an instant connection to it.
Yeah.
So, and with that, I can't have the USS Flag, although I did make an LCV.
Can't you?
Model. Yeah. I didn't have it printed yet, but I have the model. It's going to take probably like a year to print or something, if it ever gets printed. But that model is huge. Yeah. But the other models that I have a freighter for the Arbco Star from the comics. I have a lot of different pieces I use. I have an oil rig that I've made. And our gaming table that we have here that we use is 4x8. Yeah. So I'm able to lay down. I have a plastic sheet from like a party sheet that's basically just an ocean background party sheet that you put down for like kids parties. And then I put a plastic painter's drop cloth on top of it that's transparent to give it like that wave and shimmer effect. And then the whole table becomes the ocean. So I've used it for like amphibious actions, for assaults on the oil rig, to all kinds of stuff. We have a Sea of Lost Souls game coming up once this quarantine lifts, where it's the next part of like the Pyramid of Darkness, and that'll be an entirely water table. There will be no land. So
can't wait, man. That'd be awesome. And the pictures, all of your event games are on your blog, of course, the pictures from them. And just, just watching, Cobra and G.I. Joe characters trying to escape the monster almost from the Thing, from the Arctic,
right.
having battles sort of along the swamps next to the oil rig. I mean, having Joe's go on a dungeon crawl through a Cobra base. I mean, you just have the best game. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, man.
I like seeing the players get involved and they get stories out of it too. My cousin still talks about the Arctic horror game that we did where he played Quinn. And basically, he was the last man standing in that game for the most part, where he was just killing a ton of people with a 50 cal that he found.
Nice.
And just as players were about to escape, he 50 cal'd the back of a Cobra ice wolf and ended up blowing it up with them intact inside. So.
Well, speaking of ice wolves, I think we're going to have you back very soon to talk about snow vehicles and snow characters, because you've done a great job with the Cobra Naval Troops. But if we're talking about circa 1985 unit builders for Cobra, I think we got to talk about my favorite, the Snow Serpent. What do you say to that?
Oh, yeah, that's a great action figure, great miniature, great character. Yep, definitely.
All right. Well, Doc, thank you so much for coming on. And guys, if you like this video, please subscribe below and check out what we've been doing and what we're going to continue to do. And please check out Dr. Mercury's Lab on Blogger. If you just search Dr. Mercury's Lab, and it is spelled Merkury. If you search that up in Google, you will find his page, and it is full of the greatest Joe tabletop pictures. The man's a legend. You need to see his stuff. Check it out.